It was supposed to be a quiet weekend. Just three of us. Agnes, my best friend since college, her husband Mark, and me. We'd been talking for months about getting away, somewhere without traffic, without phones. The Smoky Mountains were still too far for a weekend, so we chose a stretch of the Appalachian Mountains in western North Carolina instead. We planned it on a Thursday night over video call, half laughing, half exhausted. I remember the little details because that's what my mind clings to now. I just want to breathe clean air. The forecast promised clear skies and mild weather. Early fall, just enough chill to smell the leaves dying but not enough to need real coats. When we left Saturday morning, the world felt honest again. The sun was thin and gold. The air was damp from the night before. I was the one driving when the paved road turned to gravel. We reached the trailhead around noon. It was quiet. There was another car parked at the edge of the lot, old and dust-coated, but no sign of people. The first few hours felt perfect. We hiked about 5 miles before setting up camp beside a stream. Mark handled the tent while I gathered wood, and Agnes started the little propane stove for coffee. Everything was easy, practiced. As dusk came, the forest dimmed fast. We ate dinner by the fire, our faces lit orange and everything else swallowed by dark. I remember saying, "You know what's strange? Out here you forget the world even exists," Mark smirked. "Isn't that what you wanted?" It was. Until I realized that forgetting the world meant the world could forget you too. The second day, Mark checked the sky, clear blue that day. We hiked a few miles deeper into the trail, found a clearing ringed by tall poplars, and decided to stay there the second night. Around sunset, while Mark was filtering water from the stream and Agnes was writing in her little leather notebook, I noticed movement between the trees. A person. I thought it was Mark coming back early, but the shape was wrong, slighter, hunched. The figure stepped into the edge of the clearing and stopped. A woman. Her clothes were torn and streaked with dirt. Her hair was tangled, her skin pale as paper except for the raw scratches across her arms. She looked at us like she couldn't decide if we were real. Agnes stood immediately. Hey, are you okay?" The woman didn't answer. Her lips trembled and she took one cautious step forward before collapsing onto her knees. I ran to her. Her hands were cold, her whole body shaking. "You're safe," I told her. "It's okay." "What happened?" She opened her mouth, then after a long breath she whispered, "He's coming." We brought her close to the fire. Mark wrapped her in his jacket. It took 10 minutes before she could speak again. Her name was Lena, and she'd been hiking alone. At least that's how it started. She said a man had been following her. Not just one day, but several. He never came close, just stayed far enough back that she could hear twigs snapping, footsteps stopping when she stopped. She'd tried to lose him, taking side trails, changing pace, but she heard him again. Mark tried to stay calm. "Maybe it's just another hiker, someone lost?" Lena shook her head violently. "He says he loves me. He says I'm never getting away again." The way she said made my stomach turn. We decided we'd hike out at dawn, all of us. Safety in numbers. Mark double-checked the perimeter, making sure the fire was strong enough to keep animals away. Still, none of us slept much. Until the third night. We'd packed up most of our things, ready to leave early. Mark was still awake by the dying fire, and I'd just crawled into the tent when Lena let out a scream. Mark stood immediately. "What is it?" Then we heard a man's voice, low and cracked like someone who hadn't spoken in days. "Lena, you made me walk so far." He was standing at the edge of the clearing. Mark grabbed the hatchet. I pushed out of the tent. The man stepped closer, and I saw his face, sunburned, eyes too wide, lips dry and split. He looked feral, like he'd forgotten how to be human. Lena shrank behind me. Agnes froze. Mark raised his voice. "You need to back off right now." The man tilted his head. "She's mine." "No," Mark said steady. "You need to turn around and leave. Right now." The man laughed softly. "You don't understand. She ran from me. I told her we could be happy. She doesn't get to run." There was something in his tone that made my skin crawl. calm, almost gentle, like he was explaining something obvious to a child. Mark took a step forward. "I'm not going to tell you again." The man's eyes flicked to the hatchet, then to the fire, then back to Mark. "You won't use it." That's when he started walking closer. Slow, confident, like he already knew how this would end. I don't know what came over me. Maybe it was the weeks of stress, or the way his voice made Lena flinch, or just something primal waking up. But I stepped forward too, right beside Mark, and shouted, "No," barked, a raw animal sound that ripped straight from my chest. "Stop!" The word echoed off the trees louder than I expected. The man froze. His mouth twitched into a smile. "You think you scare me?" I didn't answer. I took another step, my hands shaking but my voice steady. "You take one more step and I swear I'll split your head open before you touch her." It wasn't a bluff. I believed it when I said it. He stared at me for a long time, eyes flickering. Then slowly he lifted his hands. "Fine," he said softly. "You can have her. For now." Then he turned and slipped back into the darkness. We waited until the sound of his footsteps faded. Then we waited longer, just to be sure. None of us spoke. The forest was utterly still again. We left before sunrise. Lena barely walked, so Mark and I took turns helping her down the trail. When we finally reached the ranger station, a young ranger was outside sweeping the porch. He looked up confused as we stumbled out of the trees. He called for backup, then for the sheriff. 2 days later, they caught him about 20 miles from where we'd camped. His name was Daniels. He had a restraining order filed against him in another state. Lena had left him months before, but he'd tracked her through her social media posts, followed her car, waited until she was alone. They said he'd been living in the woods for over a week, surviving on creek water and stolen food, watching her every night. I'd been running myself into the ground on 2 jobs, 6-day weeks, no real sleep one night, sitting at the gas station where I worked nights. I realized I couldn't remember the last time I'd gone a full day without checking a schedule, answering a call, or forcing a smile. I felt like something had eaten away at me from the inside, so I decided I needed a reset, something real, just me in silence. That's how I ended up packing a tent, a paper map, and 3 days' worth of supplies, heading into a stretch of Colorado woods I'd only ever seen mentioned in old ranger logs. No trails listed online, no campsites. It sounded perfect. When I pulled up to the dirt path that passed for a trailhead, when I stepped out of the car and the door shut behind me, I felt relaxed, out of stress, honestly out of real stress. The first few miles were fine, but as the light started to shift, I noticed something. The air wasn't just quiet. It was about then that I passed an old, splintered signpost. The words had long faded, only a few letters carved deep enough to read, "Cool," and 1978. It leaned crookedly, like something had grabbed it and twisted. After that point, the woods started to feel wrong, and that feeling, the one you get when you know someone's behind you, started to follow me. I told myself it was just nerves. First time camping solo, mind playing tricks, but I couldn't shake it. When I finally reached a clearing, I knew instantly that I hadn't found it. It had found me. The trees opened into a perfect circle, not roughly shaped and perfect. The ground inside was bare, no leaves, no roots, nothing. In the center stood a tree unlike the rest, tall, blackened, twisted like it had been frozen mid-scream. That's when I saw it. A strip of red fabric caught on one of its branches, fluttering weakly. I moved closer, my heart thudding. The cloth was old, torn, raw, and instantly familiar. A piece of a red flannel jacket. My cousin Matt wore that same jacket the day he vanished. It had been 5 years. The day he disappeared in the part of Colorado he was just gone, vanished between trees. Search teams, helicopters, nothing. I'd spent months blaming myself for not keeping up with him, for not noticing when he slipped away. Seeing that fabric now felt like someone had just jammed a knife into my chest. I reached out to touch it, and that's when everything changed. My ears popped like I was underwater, and the world tilted a few degrees sideways. The forest went silent. This was worse. My pulse thundered in my ears. I felt it, something watching me. Not from a distance, but close. Too close, then I heard it. Read then. The sound was wet, gurgling, like someone trying to speak through a mouthful of blood. My stomach flipped. I spun toward the tree line, and that's when I saw it. A figure, tall. Too tall. It had to hunch beneath the branches, its shoulders scraping bark as it moved. Its skin looked raw, like it had been peeled and left to freeze. The arms were long and wrong, the elbows bending the wrong way. But the face, God, the face, and that's what broke me. It looked like Matt, sort of. Oh my God, like someone had tried to recreate him from memory. The jaw was too wide, the eyes just black hollows, and that smile smooth, packed with too many teeth. The thing tilted its head, just like Matt used to when he was joking with me. Then in that same broken, wet voice, it said, "Come home." I couldn't move. My body felt pinned, its face twitched like a glitch, and it took a step closer. The ground beneath it didn't crunch. It just shifted as though it was walking on something soft, something that gave way. I forced a breath and bolted. I don't even remember choosing to run, my body just did. I tore through the trees, branches clawing at my arms, my pack ripping open behind me. I could hear it, the thing moving through the woods, not running but sliding, whispering my name. Every step I took, it felt closer. I fell at some point. My hands hit the dirt, but somehow I went back to the trailhead. I just ran until I saw the glint of my car through the trees. I slammed the door shut and locked it. I just sat there staring at the forest. Something moved behind the tree line, tall, and it took me seconds to leave that place after that. 2 weeks later, another camper went missing in that same stretch of forest. A young guy. They said search teams found nothing. Now I don't camp there. I don't even walk near the Colorado woods anymore. Philip is my boyfriend. We'd been together a little over a year when this happened. Long enough that I thought I knew him. His habits, his moods, the way he gets quiet when he's thinking. But after what happened in the Smoky Mountains, I realized I didn't know him at all. It started as a weekend plan. Philip said we needed a break. He found a campsite way up in the Smokies, past the park gates and a few miles off a service road that barely showed up on GPS. He said it would be good for us. Quiet, peaceful. Remember the sound of gravel crunching under the tires as we pulled off the main road. Trees closed in on both sides, tall and thick, letting in only a little sunlight. It was one of those drives where you realize how deep you are in nature. No cell signal, no houses, just trees and the hum of the engine. When Philip parked, he turned to me and smiled. "No Wi-Fi," he said. Perfect. The campsite itself wasn't much, just a clearing near a half-collapsed ranger shack. The door to it hung off the hinges, and one of the windows had been smashed long ago. There was an old metal sign nailed to a tree that said Site 12, half covered in moss. It felt abandoned. Still, Philip was in good spirits. He got the tent out of the trunk, started laying out the stakes, humming to himself. I tried to match his energy, but something about the place made me uneasy. By sunset, the fire was going and the tent was up. I tried to relax. We cooked hot dogs over the flames and drank cheap beer, listening to the crackle of wood.
For a while, it was actually nice.
But later that night, when Philip went down to the creek to wash the pan, I saw something odd near the fire pit, a cigarette butt. It wasn't Philip's, he didn't smoke. And neither did I, it looked fresh too. Still a little ash on the tip pressed into the dirt. I called out to him, but he didn't answer. When he came back, I showed him the cigarette. He glanced at it, shrugged, and said, "Probably old. People camp here all the time." That wasn't true. The path leading up here was so overgrown that even getting our car in took effort. There were no fresh tire tracks, no footprints. But I didn't argue. I just let it go. That night I had trouble sleeping. Twice I sat up, clutching the flashlight, pointing it toward the tent flap. Nothing. Just the fire dying down outside. When morning came, Philip was already up, sitting by the ashes, sipping coffee. He looked completely relaxed. I told him what I'd heard. He smiled, leaned over and kissed my forehead. "You just get in your head too much," he said. "You gotta let the woods be the woods." Maybe he was right. Maybe I was just anxious. We spent the morning hiking along a trail that cut through the ridge. Philip liked being in control. He led the way, map in hand, checking the compass like he'd trained for this his whole life. I trailed behind, taking pictures, trying to shake off the weird feeling that we weren't alone. Around noon, he said he wanted to go into town for supplies. "The gas can's almost empty," he told me, "and I'll grab more ice." I offered to go with him, but he said it would be quicker if I stayed behind. "Just relax," he said. "I'll be back in an hour or two at most." When he drove off, I sat on the log near the fire pit, staring at the dirt road until there was nothing but silence again. That's when I noticed it. There were footprints, 2 sets. One belonged to Philip. The other, smaller, lighter, leading around the side of the tent and toward the old ranger shack. I froze. The prints looked recent. I followed them only a few feet before stopping. The shack door moved slightly in the wind, creaking just enough to sound like a whisper. I backed away. An hour passed. Then 2. Philip didn't come back. I told myself maybe the gas station was farther than he thought. Maybe the roads were bad. By late afternoon, I was inside the tent, reading a paperback by flashlight when I heard the sound. Crunching gravel. Footsteps again. I thought it was Philip. I opened the tent flap, no car, no one. The noise came from the edge of the trees, slow and steady, moving closer. Then silence. And then, something slid under the tent flap. An envelope. My hands shook as I picked it up. The paper was damp, smudged with dirt. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Oh my God, it was me. At different points in my life. There was one of me at a college party, holding a red cup. One outside my old apartment carrying groceries. One taken through the window of the cafe where I used to work. And then, the one that made my stomach drop. Me, asleep in my bed last year, the blanket pulled halfway up my chest. I could barely breathe. Whoever took those photos had been watching me for years. I stumbled out of the tent, scanning the tree line. "Who's there?" I shouted. My voice broke halfway through. Nothing answered. The woods stayed quiet, too quiet. I didn't know what to do. I couldn't call anyone. No signal, no service. I thought about running down the road, but I didn't even know which direction led back to the main highway. So I waited. By the time Philip's car headlights appeared through the trees, the sun had set completely. I ran toward him the second he parked. "Someone was here," I said. "Someone left these." I shoved the envelope into his hands. He looked through the photos slowly, one by one. Just this calm, like he already knew what he'd find. When he looked back up, he smiled faintly. "Where'd you get these?" "They were under the tent," I said. "Someone's been watching me." "For years, Philip. We have to go now." He just shook his head. "You're letting yourself get worked up again. You probably dropped these yourself." That sentence hit me. "How could I have dropped them?" I said. "I've never seen them before." But he didn't argue. He just started packing up the cooler, whistling softly. When I asked where he'd been for the past 5 hours, he said, "The gas station was farther than I thought." But I noticed something. His jacket smelled faintly of smoke. Not campfire smoke, cigarette smoke. I didn't sleep that night. He did, out cold like nothing happened. I lay there staring at the tent ceiling, waiting for footsteps, for breathing outside. At dawn, I told him I wanted to leave. He just nodded, packed up the tent, and said, "If that's what you want." The drive back down the mountain felt endless. My stomach churned the whole way. When we hit a stretch of road with signal, I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from my mom, 1 from an unknown number. Philip noticed. "You're jumpy," he said. "I just want to get home." He smiled. "Home is wherever we are, right?" Something in the way he said it chilled me. When we finally reached town, he stopped at a diner for breakfast, acting like everything was normal. I excused myself to go to the bathroom, but instead I went out the back door, ran across the parking lot, and straight into the police station 2 blocks down. I told them everything. The photos, the footprints, the man who might be following me. They listened, took notes, and then told me the same thing I'd feared. Without clear proof, there's not much we can do. They offered to send a patrol to check the campsite, but by then I knew that wouldn't help. Whoever had been watching me was gone. Maybe they'd never even been there when I was awake. I didn't go back for Philip. I left the car, the gear, everything. I got a bus ticket and went straight to my parents' house 2 states away. I changed my number, deleted all my social media, bought new locks for the doors. A week later, a package showed up at my parents' doorstep. Inside was a single photograph, me standing outside the police station, the day I reported everything. That's when I realized it didn't matter where I went or what name I used. Someone had always been watching, and if I'm being honest, deep down I think it was Philip. Because when I left him at that diner, I saw something sitting on the passenger seat of his car, an old disposable camera.